Welcome, everybody. It's a real pleasure to welcome you to this webinar on ghost management. Basically, we will be presenting our practical guide for the investigation mapping of health affairs. So my name is Marc-André Gagnon. I'm a professor in public policy at Carleton University. Um, at Carleton, what we do, it's now a tradition. We begin every event with Len acknowledgements. So I am hosting this event as a member of faculty at Carleton University. Carleton University is located on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. In North America and across the world, many of us are working to understand how we can help to build a better future in partnership with Indigenous communities. Our land acknowledgement is a very small part of that process. So just an outline for the next hour. You're still stuck with me for the next 10 minutes. I'll be doing a bit of an introduction on issue of ghost management. And then I will let Catherine and Serena take the floor for 30 minutes to present this practical guide we just published. And then we'll keep 15 minutes for questions and answers. So my name is Marc-André Gagnon, professor in public policy. My research focuses on the political economy of the pharmaceutical sector. I am the principal investigator for the Ghost Management Research Crew, which analyzes the behind-the-scenes corporate strategies to shape narratives, markets, and social structures. This Ghost Management Research Group, basically, our research question is what dynamics and systematic strategies of influence have been central to the commercial success of large corporations and pharmaceuticals and agrochemicals as well. So we're looking really at two sectors, pharmaceuticals, agrochemicals. So we've been building on the research group is made of both academic researchers and investigative journalists as well. So we've been building on multiple case studies of ghost management. So the research project develops a theoretical framework to understand ongoing corporate strategies, analyzing these case studies relating to pharma and agrochemicals. We have three parts: systematic identification and categorizations of ghost management strategies, systematic mapping of actors, stakeholders, and resources used for ghost management, and testing the framework by using it at the basis of new investigation. So what is this notion of ghost management? I would like maybe to bring you back to my PhD dissertation, so 2009. And the research question for my PhD dissertation at the time was, okay, when we look at the pharmaceutical sector, the dominant corporations, basically big pharma. So what we see is that since the 1980s, the dominant corporations in that sector, we've been seeing an increasing profitability of these companies. But at the same time, what we were seeing was a decrease in therapeutic innovation. So in a sector where there was less and less innovation, we had at the same time more and more profitability. So for me, the question is, how can we understand this, let's say, differential growth, for example, as compared to other sectors? And at the time, my focus was working on intellectual property rights. It's just, okay, well, we changed the whole structural system when it comes to intellectual property rights, and basically we can make more money by extending these property rights, and that's all. But the thing is, then doing the research, no, the story was far more complicated than that. And in particular, this is where I found the work of Sergio Sismondo, and I say hi to Sergio, who is among the participants today. Sergio, philosophy of science at Queen's University, basically was explaining the way drug companies were capable of shaping narratives around their product. So it's this idea that when for pharmaceutical, what is a pharmaceutical product? Basically, it's a molecule surrounded by information. And for Sergio, the question is basically, how do we shape that information for commercial interest? So looking especially when it comes to the scientific literature. So the way we're constructing the scientific literatures. So we need to keep in mind that when we have randomized controlled trials for new molecules, um, all the data needs to be submitted to regulatory agencies. But at the same time, in the scientific literature, it's just not everything is necessarily published in the scientific literature. There's cherry picking of the results in order to everything basically telling the benefits of the new product will be published versus the different risks associated to the products. Basically, you just keep this silent. So we end up with the scientific literature that is often biased, not because there's lies being told, but just because of the cherry picking of the results that is being published out there. So that's one issue, and basically fantastic investigation in terms of going to international conferences of ghostwriters, basically of medical writing companies, and seeing that well, you did have the medical journals going to present there because for a medical journal thing, if you want to increase your impact factor, and that's one thing, and at the same time, you know that the papers written by ghostwriters, by medical writing companies, it's part of a communication campaign of the drug companies. Basically, these papers are being produced to create sales pitch, sales arguments, basically for sales representatives of the drug companies. And you know that they will be distributing these papers on all the desks of all physicians in the country, basically. So that increases your impact factor, but at the same time, that gives you a lot of, oh geez, I don't remember how to say that in English, but tirer à part. So reprints, basically. You can sell all the reprints. So seeing that it, in these international conferences of medical writing companies, you ended up with medical journals basically calling for, please publish in our journal, and understanding basically the economic incentives at play and how it did shape the narrative, the scientific narrative about a drug was something central. So for me, in the old PhD dissertation, the whole focus on, in fact, understanding corporate power, but the corporate power of drug companies in terms of shaping the scientific narrative, but shaping social structures as well. And then understanding that how much resources is spent on this as compared to what is spent on research and development, for example. So more is being spent in terms of shaping social structures than just producing and innovating. So based on that, what I did a bit over the years, so building on Sergio, is just trying to understand these different forms of shaping social structures through different forms of captures. So the scientific capture with medical journals is super important. Professional captures, basically the fact that, for example, in the United States, drug companies spend over $60,000 per year per physician to influence their prescribing habits. This is absolutely huge. Need to keep in mind that the pharmaceutical sector for an economist is a fantastic market. Market is a supply and demand, and the demand side in pharmaceuticals is the prescribing physician, but the prescribing physician is not paying for the drugs. So you have a demand without a budget constraint, which is a bit El Dorado of economic theory. So the massive amount of resources spent to try to influence prescribing habits is absolutely huge. But then looking at media capture, the fact that you have 10, 12 people doing public relations for every journalist, looking at civil society capture as well. So the importance of patient groups in particular, patient groups often funded by drug companies and basically embracing the narrative of the drug companies to get the drug reimbursed as fast as possible at the highest price possible. To that, for me, it was important to add, for example, other types of captures that were also shaping social structures. So, for example, the technological capture through intellectual property rights, market capture. So basically the building of market power through mergers and acquisitions, for example, or different types of collaboration agreements. And regulatory capture. I mean, I'm a prof in public policy. This is a long-standing issue. And let's just say that the lobbying of pharmaceutical companies is absolutely massive. Year after year in the United States, for example, it is always the first domain for lobbying in the United States. So with this, basically, we're trying to build a framework using these categories of capture and trying to map what is happening for different products. And what we see is that we constantly have the same patterns. There's basically some playbook that is being used, and this is what we're trying to understand. That led me to, so working on this, developing these categories of capture. And in 2018, I met with Catherine Riva and Serena Tinari, which was a fantastic meeting at the Overdiagnosis Conference in Quebec City. And basically, I had these two investigative journalists telling me, you know, Mark, we've been using your categorization and we've been implementing this when mapping for specific products when we're doing our journalistic investigation, and it's working super well. So basically, just fantastic. Well, we need to talk. And we've been discussing. Out of that, we also created this ghost management research group. And we decided to write together this practical guide for the investigation mapping of health affairs that were just published 2 weeks ago. So it's called Ghost Management at Work. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Catherine Riva and Serena Tinari, who will be presenting the report. So just some words on Catherine Riva is an investigative journalist specialized in public health and pharmaceuticals with a particular emphasis on market approval, conflicts of interest, evidence-based medicines, design and methodology of clinical trials. Catherine trains journalists and researchers in the skills needed to investigate big pharma and analyze medical research. Her in-depth articles are published by Swiss media and by international biomedical journals. Her work has received numerous awards, and she's a co-founder of Recheck with Serena Tinari. Serena Tinari started working as a journalist in 1994. Between 2002 and 2015, she was an investigative reporter and documentary maker for the Swiss public broadcaster, primarily specialized in medicines and healthcare. She has experience on human rights and digital security. She is a member of the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and a contributor to the British Medical Journal. And they also publish with the Global Investigative Journalism Network, the guide Investigating Health and Medicine. Catherine, Serena, the floor is yours.
So, hello everyone, and thank you for being with us today. I'm going to present in the name of both of us, and then we are here. May you have questions after this presentation. So, hang on a sec. That technology has to be helping us. So we start always with disclosures because we believe that disclosing your potential conflicts of interest is super important. So we are the founders and co-directors of a Swiss nonprofit, which is called Recheck, Investigating and Mapping Health Affairs. And Recheck is not accepting any direct or indirect pharmaceutical or medical devices industry money. We are paid contributors with the investigative unit of the British Medical Journal. On our website, there is plenty of information about our work, our ethics, and we also have a special platform. It's a secure platform. If anybody wants to leak to us, or in case if anybody wants to donate to us. We also have a Substack page. We post time to time, and we are also on X, formerly Twitter, with these personal accounts. So beside all that, in the last years, Catherine and we focused quite a lot in making toolboxes available to journalists and to researchers. Since many years, we have been training, giving training to newsrooms, to journalists, and not only, in the methods that we use that put together the evidence-based medicine, the so-called EBM, and the standards of investigative journalism. And we added to the cocktail the framework of the ghost management. So on the left, you see the guide that we ordered in 2020, actually, that was on commission by the Global Investigative Journalists Network. Actually, the updated version should be out today or tomorrow. Anyways, it's coming. And in the new edition, there is also a chapter about ghost management, actually. And then on the right, you will see the guide that we are actually presenting today, that we wrote together with Marc-André Gagnon. And it's a step-by-step handbook. This is the way how we conceived it, actually, to help, that's our aim, to help researchers and journalists using the ghost management framework combined with the other two main methods I mentioned before for in-depth research in the field of health and medicine. So basically, what do we investigate? We usually investigate medical interventions that are heavily promoted, even though their benefit-harms ratio is uncertain, is poor, or just unfavorable. So you don't have much benefit. You're left with the harms. On our website, you will have there is a collection of many investigations we have been doing. We are both senior. I mean, we are not the youngest. Let's put it this way. We work since many years, so there is quite a lot of material if you're interested in this. So why this in the public interest? To investigate and to expose medical interventions that are not appropriate. So problematic medical interventions, first of all, may harm and kill people. They do waste resources, and we all know that the resources of the public health system are limited. Someone say this is like a cake. So if you use a big slice for something, at one point you won't have many more slices for more important things maybe, or basic things. And then there is also this very important point, we believe, that inappropriate medical interventions or knowledge that is actually flowed jeopardize the production of knowledge and its transmission. So what that means. So we have here one example, just to give you, like, maybe you're not specializing in this field. In both guides, you will find many examples of this problem. But one we believe speaks volumes is the recent controversy surrounding the theory of the Alzheimer's disease cause. How does it work? What is triggering? What is the functioning of this disease? So we will keep it short, but for decades, actually, the dominant hypothesis in the search for a cure for Alzheimer's disease has been that the accumulation of beta amyloid proteins on the surface of neurons forms plaques. And they will block neuronal signals, leading to the onset of the symptoms. So this all started with an article, a really important article that was published in 2006 in Nature, a so-called prestigious biomedical journal, and which was confirming this hypothesis. So since 2006, these findings have been used by dozens of scientists in their research, and it has been cited over 2,300 times. So these findings were behind the development of at least 2 controversial drugs that have been widely prescribed. But an investigation that was published in 2022 in Science, another journal, showed that the data underlying the original study had been falsified. So this is a fraud, of course, but this could mean that hundreds of millions of dollars in grants have been spent for nothing, and that many of the Alzheimer's studies that have been conducted over the last 15 years were based on a wrong hypothesis, again. So patients have been prescribed drugs with no clinical benefits. So if a medical intervention has no benefits, again, we are left only with its potential harms. So we believe that this case, you find it also in the Ghost Management Guide we are presenting today, shows quite clearly what happens if knowledge is being jeopardized by bad science, corrupted science. So what is the problem? This, we call it the grim reality. The problem is that the frequency with which scandals erupt in the healthcare sector shows that just because a medical intervention is being promoted, recommended, or even reimbursed by a public health system, we cannot assume that it is necessarily appropriate. In the guide, in both guides actually, you find plenty of examples. OxyContin is a very, very famous example worldwide. 2 medical devices, a really pretty under-regulated industry, we can say. 2, for instance, another good example or bad example is the atypical antipsychotics. These are among the best-selling classes of drugs. However, the manufacturers of the 5 products, which together account for the 75% of the United States market, is a market, it's like over 18 billions US dollar. So it's a lot of public health money involved. They all have been fined in the United States for fraud, basically. So it's a grim reality, but that's unfortunately what is the situation. So we have also many problems in the typical health reporting. We believe, or we have seen through all these years, that standard media coverage on health products is frequently ends up being complacent with shady corporate practice, because the information presented is incomplete, to put it mildly. There is no independent assessment of the risks and benefits, and this is really important. Of course, you need to be able to do that, but we believe it's really the core of our work as a journalists. And then the potential conflicts of interest of the interviewed experts or physicians, they are often undisclosed. I mean, most of the times they are not asked for their potential conflicts of interest, and they are just not disclosed in the articles or reportings. So very often, unfortunately, such reporting ends up relying on information that is directly or indirectly stemming from corporate communication. And of course, if you want to sell something, you are going to present the highlights of your products, right? So journalists and the media play a really key role because every actor in the health system tries to have an influence on our reporting. Easily labeled as the bad guys, you have the pharmaceutical or medical device industry. Or usually also we put the fingers how these are the bad guys to the private or semi-public insurances, right? And yet, what about all the others? University hospitals, doctors and their organizations, patients' organizations that Marc-André already mentioned, also NGOs, public health authorities. So all these agents of this system, they all have an interest actually in your or our reporting. So going to the ghost management, here there is like one possible definition, a premeditated and multilateral strategy that stays hidden in order to shape science and markets. So that's a concept that was formalized first by Sergio Sismondo, that is here with us today, and further developed by Marc-André. So for us at Recheck, for Catherine and for me, getting to know this theoretical framework was extremely interesting because we have been already working for many years exactly in the same sort of framework, but lacking the academical or theoretical framework, the bottom. So since 2010, basically that's how we work. We map our investigations finding. So we start in a very simple way, just putting pieces of paper together. And then we start linking all this information. And then we start making simple maps, and then we try to make them more and more developed. Because what we realized working in this field as a medical investigative journalist is that many different agents are at work when it's about health and medicine. So the mapping helps to identify all the elements or the links that you may be missing, because when you dig deeper in this field, you end up collecting an insane amount of information. So you might really get lost, make mistakes, don't see something, and the connections are really super important. So then when we found out that this was there, actually, we did something quite simple. We tested the ghost management theoretical framework on 3 investigations, long form investigations we had already done. We wanted to test, is this working? And actually, the result was incredible because it was really like, what a match. Because we came to the conclusion that the ghost management framework, first of all, achieves to correctly capture the complexity of the system that we have been observing in our work, breaks down the mechanism of influence that can be super complex, and really simplifies the task of identifying the actors and the strategies that are working also in the shadow. So it's a wonderful tool for our research work. This was really our wake-up call. So we did this work and we presented it at the scientific conference, and we finally also published it. And these are, you can see, these are some of the maps. We realized we made like applying the ghost management framework. And these are in open access. You see here the address. That's an open access platform. So as Marc-André mentioned, then we met, and it was a great meeting, and then we decided to start working together. This is the website of the Ghost Management Research Project. I personally find really amazing that this is bringing together 2 usually very different tribes, the investigative journalism and the researchers, we work together, and it's really very interesting. In our website, you find a lot of resources. So we really invite you to check it out. As Marc-André already mentioned, at the moment, we stick with 7 different level of captures. And in our experience, they really managed to represent what is going on in this system. So I will not go into details because, first of all, Marc-André already introduced them. As you can see, they are very specific. So there is the regulatory capture that is super important, by the way, because it means influencing the regulation and also the laws, of course. There is the media capture that is also extremely important. That means capturing, connecting through this with the public and the elite opinion, which means also the decision makers, which is so important. The civil society capture, the scientific capture. This is very depressing, but it's happening all the time, and so forth. So you find all the details about this in our extensive guide. It's like about 50 pages. We tried to not make it too complicated, but of course it's, I mean, it needs a bit of focusing. It's not like very, very simple. Let's put it this way. So what is the problem? This is a typical visualization of the main bodies of the health and medicine system. We use this also when we give training to journalists or not journalists. So this is how the system is supposed to be and function. So because the big question you might have, how is that possible that the ghost management achieves to hijack the system? There must be a problem behind it, right? Because we tend to assume that pharmaceutical products and medicine policies are managed in a system that is regulated and controlled by several safeguards that can correct each other in case of failure. That's how that is supposed to work. And we do trust, in the first place, that this system works, right? Also because one day or the next, we will all need it. So on top, you see the regulatory agencies. They are in charge of the registration of clinical trials, of establishing and maintaining standards. And here the conflict of interest disclosure is mandatory throughout the process. Then you see the biomedical journals. They are their core business is standards, best if peer-reviewed. And also here, the conflict of interest disclosure is actually mandatory. Then you have the public health in charge of, you know, that's the knowledge, the expertise at the service of the public interest, right? And also here, theoretically, we shouldn't have conflict of interest, or at least they should be disclosed. And then we have the experts. Also from them, we expect them to be knowledgeable, working for the public interest. They write guidelines. They promote the best practice, right? Right. And then we also have the independent journals, including, for instance, the Cochrane collaboration, and the doctors, of course. And then we have, if everything would fail, let's put it this way, we can always say, no, well, there is the justice, right? There are lawsuits, there are trials, case law, there is the regulation. So that's the nice theory. But honestly, after so many years investigating in this field, the grim reality is this system is very dysfunctional. And often, really often, fails. It doesn't manage to make it work. So how is this possible? Honestly, when you do apply the framework, analytical framework of the ghost management to this very map, well, when the system gets captured, it gets paralyzed and is really unable to react in a consistent way. So in a way, it might seem incredible. So we really invite you to read the guide and to check the website of our project and all the publications. It ends up really becoming that apparatus of hidden workers that Sergio Sismondo has described in his book. It's just unable to function properly. So it's really eye-opening. And that's also what happened to us when we started using it. So now, if we go on, some of our findings, we try, of course, today to keep it short and simple. So the driving forces are remarkably similar, and often they revolve around some constants, some recurring elements. Some of these are really openly disclosed in the communication designed to promote or launch an intervention, a drug, whatever it is. Others are kept hidden, but there is a large reservoir of scandals that are just waiting to be exposed, investigated, and exposed. I just give you a couple of examples. Like you might see those also as red flags. Usually the incidence of a illness, a disease, is presented as really high and very impressive. So there we always suggest our students to retrieve the source of this claim. Was it maybe in a press release? What was the data used for that? Another typical example of a constant and a red flag is check the experts that give quotes to the media. Do they maybe have conflicts of interest? Keep in mind that is a very complex situation. It's not just like bribes, like this idea, a bit romantic, no. And there in the Global Investigative Journalism Guide we wrote, there is a lot on the science of the influence. And then suddenly you might see that positive studies and opinion papers will appear on biomedical journals. Is this just by accident? So these are typical events that you will meet when you investigate in this field. So we believe that mapping and deciphering all this visible and invisible constant really help you go deeper in your investigation. And you will see that some of this is really quite systematic. And all this will help you a lot in your research. You can expect some advantages. One, it's that by using this systematical framework, you will have a more clean investigation. You have like a checklist. In this guide we are presenting today, you have several checklists. So you can really try to make it tidy. And then you will see that there is no more the investigation of an isolated case where everything must be considered from scratch and reinvented. But you can use each investigation, you are building up knowledge, actually. And you will be helping also characterizing more precisely the system that is behind this, which is really in the public interest, we believe. So we will keep it now simple because we want to anyway leave some time for questions, maybe. We work in two ways. The first stage is deconstructing. So we start with the narrative that was deployed to launch a product or an intervention, and we just analyze it. So we go over a series of questions. You see some in the slides. And then we tried, first of all, to find answers to these questions. When we started working together with Marc-André Gagnon for this project of this guide, we decided at one point to figure out a system to not miss any question. So how to make it as systematic as possible. So we ended up adopting this so-called Jacobson model. It's pretty old, if you want. It was developed in 1960. He was a Russian, Czech-American theorist and linguist, and it was presented many years ago as part of his work on communication. And it offers a brief overview of the elements that are constituting all linguistic processes, all acts maps of verbal communication. It's a super interesting tool because simplifies a lot your work. It might seem complicated at the first glance. We agree with this, but actually the result is the opposite. It makes it really more simple to break down the complexity. So we adapted actually Jacobson model first for the purposes of the in-depth research, and all this you will find in the guide really described step by step. And we broke down his main items in classes, and we added a fifth one. That is the class actually of the ghost management. It's really the behind the scenes. So what happens when you use it is that you end up having this kind of picture. Because again, when you work really on in-depth research in this field, you end up having so much information that is really overwhelming. So breaking it down by these categories, very formalized in a way, helps you really see the links. And these are like these two examples of the results that you can actually achieve using this methodology. This means that your investigation is going to be more streamlined. You will have a more intelligible way around the limited number of elements. It's going to be more exhaustive, and we feel is more rigorous because you won't miss pieces. You won't get lost, and it helps you really see how the message was prepared, launched, maintained, where the money came from, which intermediaries were activated, and how much effort was invested. So all this brings you actually to unmask hidden strategies. And you can also identify, is actually quite funny. I mean, it wouldn't be dramatic because of course, an appropriate medical intervention is bad for society and for the patients, right? But sometimes you get really to really quite interesting results because you see links that you were not expecting to see. And what we do then, the next stage is reconstructing. So we work with mapping, and mapping is a really good way to see all these strategies at work and make sense of all this complexity. So this is an example of a very simple map. In the guide, you will find many of them with also the explanations of what means what, because we usually use different colors to mean the production of knowledge. In this case is the black arrow, and then you have the money flows, but it's really super interesting because really reveals the real structure of how this intervention has been developed and promoted. And you end up having this kind of maps, which of course, again, can seem a bit disconcerting at first, but you will see if you try to use it, that it can help a lot making a more solid work in this field. So this is again our guide. It's in open access. It's available in French and in English. You find it on the website of the Ghost Management Project and also on Recheck website as we wrote it together. And in this guide, you will find also this kind of checklists that can really be used for you, like trying to see, okay, did I dig deep enough in all the possible agents? Because these, again, are all involved when there is the promotion of a medical intervention that is eventually not fully or exactly in the public interest. So I will stop here because, as I said, we would really like also to hear from you. Thank you. Over to you, Mark.
Yes, thank you so much, Serena. I'm sorry, I clicked the wrong button and another screen just appeared. So I would like to turn to two questions. 4 questions. What you need to do, the way it will work, you need to write the questions in the question and answers box. So don't use the chat, please use the question and answers. I would just like to add one thing. that people might not like, but I think it's important. Something about this practical guide. So I'd like to say that it is officially it is a 50 pages guide, but the thing is, no, it's really a 100 pages guide. It's very dense. It's just we just add an overview of what is being discussed, but in terms of checklist and maps, we try to be very comprehensive and provide some details. So I understand that it ends up being very dense, but we're not writing for beginners neither. So, but my students basically were telling me is just they had to read it a second time in order to understand basically all the complexity and make sense of everything. So I know not the best thing to say, but yeah, the density is important and you need a bit of investment, but I think it is a worthy investment in time you will be making this. Can you give an example? So, a question by Anne-Charlotte Carignan. Can you give an example of how to use the checklist? Do you have a specific case in mind? Serena or Catherine?
Maybe I can answer. Yes, we provide some examples into the guide. We go really very specifically. For example, we cite a case of a professor that has developed an immunotherapy. I think that was his example. And this immunotherapy was touted as really a breakthrough for ovarian cancer. But in the reality, it appears that some elements were not disclosed in the messages that was provided to the media. And so if you have the checklist, it can guide your research. So you will search for the elements that are not disclosed about the illness, for example. That's the immunotherapy was supposed to cure. But you will maybe it will lead maybe your search also to the side of the patents. Because we cite this as well, and you will end up with a map with no, we put it in a table where you will have all the elements disclosed and undisclosed. So we found that. That to have all we try to be so exhaustive as possible. We put all the elements we met during our investigation. So we don't say we are finished, that's closed list. At the contrary, maybe other investigation would add some, but we found that most of the time it's always the same play that similar players are playing. They are not reinvented the wheel all the time. And I think it's really a message that is important to keep in mind. When we say you don't have to figure out something completely from scratch, that's the purpose of the list of the items, of the categories and of the classes that we put in the guide.
I would add, to answer this question, that actually the idea is exactly that you will use it as a journalist or as a researcher to whatever topic you decide to investigate. So if you come across a drug or a medical intervention, whatever it is, and you have a hint that maybe is not exactly appropriate, because maybe you have some information or you just want to research about it, this is what these guidelines are for, that you can just use them to break down the research and see what happens, what you figure out about how this medical intervention was actually promoted and how it reached the market, because that's also a very important question. Unfortunately, there are many interventions on the market that are not necessarily appropriate. And there is a lot about all this in the scientific literature.
And I would like to add something as well. So with the Blue Nyarandong, who's part of the attendees right now, so I Blue. So we did this scoping review, for example, of looking at the scientific literature, but every time scientific literature use internal documents of drug companies to better understand what was happening. And it was interesting. So you have different cases, with Prexa, for example, with Paxil, with the opioids. There's a dozen different cases. And what was interesting is that it's systematic, basically. It's the same playbook that is being played every time. Now we have a new scoping review looking at the same thing, but for chemical companies. So that should be published very soon. I just want to say the chemical sector, but then the strategies are a bit different. It's just it's the key opinion leaders. It's not the same game that what is happening in the pharmaceutical sector, but it's very similar as well. So I thought it was very interesting. But basically, by just trying to list everything that was found in the scientific literature, what we found is a dozen cases, basically, where we find the exact same type of strategies being deployed.
Yeah, if I may add, really the purpose of the checklist we provide is to remind you to ask you some questions. If I take the example of this immunotherapy against ovarian cancer, you really have to look for not just the results that are presented in percentages in the press release, but to go to the original article and to see on how many people was this drug tested, for example, and you will end up, in this case, we end up to see it was just tested on 7 people. So it doesn't, it's not enough to claim a breakthrough, but the professor was very charismatic. He came very well on TV, on radio, and so on. So the whole press was really cheering up this discovery, but it was much too early to make any conclusion. And we discovered that the goal of this strategy was to obtain more people for the clinical trials that they were needed as well. So yeah, I think the idea by bringing all the items, all the categories, all the class, is just to remind you have to ask this question, this question, this question.
Catherine and Serena, I also have a question for you. Basically, we have this practical guide in terms of providing tools, in terms of suggestions of how to do investigations. Let me make the opposite question in terms what not to do when there's a new product, you're a journalist, you want to discuss the product, what to avoid. Catherine or Serena?
Okay. Vas-y, Shane.
Well, I mean, there is a lot you can do to avoid. There is a lot to avoid. I mean, first of all, what we always say is that you should avoid copying, pasting. This is a really bad habit that unfortunately it happens in journalism. In this field, copying, pasting is really a problem because you end up really copying, pasting whatever, very often wrongful information that is just not right, and it's like PR information. We also always say that you need to read the full text of a study because you need to dig in the studies. You have to see what is the evidence about a medical intervention. And journalists often, they just need the abstract and the conclusions, but we know that at times, actually, the abstract and the conclusion, they do not contain what is all in the real paper. These are some examples. Catherine, you want to mention some more? I mean, like there is quite also good checklist about what you should do.
Yes, you shouldn't rely just on one expert to guide you into your investigation. You really should to try to make the data and the result your own. To train yourself to be able to read it. So you can, after that you can confront the expert first with his or her conflicts of interest. He must disclose them to you and to your audience, and you can confront it on a completely other level than if you just had copy paste the press release and just ask him for question just for the palatability of your paper, because you would have a real person talking or explaining the results. Yes, I think if you stick to those some rules, I think your reporting will massively improve.
Thank you so much, Serena and Catherine. It's already past an hour, so I would like to thank everybody for attending this webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared as well on our website. So thank you again, Serena. Catherine, I also want to say it's a real pleasure working with you, and I'm so happy that we managed to produce this guide, and I hope that people will find it helpful. So thank you so much, and
Thank
well,
you.
see you next time.